First at 9 this Friday, the 7th of February 2025. Bridging gaps. GovPay platform launched to digitize all government payments. President calls the move a bid to eradicate the rural-urban gap. Vote of confidence. Sri Lanka's reforms are delivering results, says the IMF. Emphasizes that the disbursement of the fourth tranche hinges on budget's compliance with EFF parameters. President vows to continue with the IMF program. High hopes. Tax expert calls on the government to focus on increasing people's spending power through Budget 2025. Legislature lights up. Prime Minister vows to continue probe into Lasantha Wickrematunga's murder. Government denies claims of carcinogens in public water supply. Ravi Karunanayake submits proposal to abolish MP's pensions.
Chilo Dairy, Sri Lankawama Kiren Perata. Obe Vishwase dinu Sensodyne, then Langamati Pharmacy in Labagata Hacker.
Kanta Parisang karagattot? Ape Parisang.
Asian Paints Causeway Aquasafe Vesat Mattu Igadarat Disney.
This is Ada Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Ada Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Drisingha joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world, brought to you by the only Sri Lanka media network to rise to the pinnacle across all media platforms, recognized as the best by every survey and beloved by the people. Now in your top story tonight, GovPay, an online platform tasked with digitizing all government payments, was launched today, facilitating Sri Lankans to make payments online when accessing public services at 16 major government institutions. Meanwhile, in another step towards building a digitalized society, services under the President's Fund rendered through his head office in Colombo were expanded to the divisional level and are now available to the public at 341 divisional secretariats island-wide. Furthermore, Sri Lanka saw the launch of another online platform today, facilitating Sri Lankans residing overseas to obtain certified copies of birth, marriage and death certificates through electronic means.
3 new key digital initiatives, including GovPay, a platform to digitize all government payments, were officially launched at the Presidential Secretariat today under the patronage of President Anuruddha Dissanayake. The relevant digital initiatives were launched in a bid to spur digitalization in Sri Lanka. The relevant digital services are available for public use from today. Through the GovPay platform, payments to 16 government entities can now be made via digital means. The Gampaha Municipal Council and the Jaffna, Kegol, Mahara, Rambukkana, Ratmalana and Thimirigassai divisional secretariats are among those 16 government entities. The GovPay payment platform is also operational at the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, the Telecommunications Regulatory Commission, the Vocational Training Authority, the National Cancer Institute, the Sri Lanka Atomic Energy Board, the Survey Department of Sri Lanka, the University of Moratuwa, the Department of Ayurveda, as well as the Department of Technical Education and Training. The relevant service will be made available through 12 commercial banks as well as through the iPay and HelaPay payment platforms. Instructions and information pertaining to the facility were made public on its official website at www.govpay.lk. Meanwhile, at the same event, official access to services provided through the President's Fund were made available at 341 divisional secretariats across the island. Since its inception in 1978, applications related to the President's Fund were only accepted by its head office in Colombo. The Electronic Birth, Marriage and Death Certificates or EBMD facility was also launched at the same event, allowing Sri Lankans abroad to obtain certified copies of birth, marriage and death certificates through electronic means at Sri Lankan diplomatic missions. Marking the commencement of the initiative, the birth certificate of a Sri Lankan residing in South Korea was issued through the online platform.
The deeper the digital economy grows into the national economy or the traditional economy, the higher the GDP growth rate can be. And it has been shown that around 1 to 3% of GDP growth uplift can be achieved by accelerating the depth of the digital economy. So to achieve this, the government of Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Digital Economy, have put together a framework, a roadmap to accelerate this journey, but safely.
Many are used to obtaining a physical receipt after making a payment. The receipt establishes their trust in the payment. How do we build this trust? Through digital payments. Even if a citizen doesn't have access to other infrastructure, they can still connect with government institutions over the internet, make payments and receive an e-receipt through a text message. This builds their trust and ensures that the payment is received by the relevant government entity. The GovPay platform provides a more convenient, trustworthy and safe payment method to its users compared to the traditional method of obtaining a paper receipt after standing in a queue for a very long time.
My ideas and opinions regarding the digital space were fueled by the need to bridge the gap between cities and villages. As a political movement, we always advocated for equality, fairness and the need to bridge the city-village gap. I believe that this is an excellent stride forward in our journey to bridge the gap between cities and villages. Digitalization plays a vital role in uplifting the standards of rural Sri Lanka. This is why the incumbent government prioritizes digitalization. We expect to minimize the use of cash. To that end, we must create a convenient digital environment with easy access. The GovPay platform will play a crucial role in creating that environment. Therefore, we must ensure the successful implementation of digitalization. The most important step in that direction is the implementation of the digital ID. The digital ID has prompted a broad discourse within society. We will consider all opinions. However, we firmly believe that the digital ID must be implemented. This project was initially proposed to be implemented in 2012, but we have failed to implement it till now. Digitalization will spur change in Sri Lanka through transparency, efficiency and bridging the rural-urban gap. Now, the International Monetary Fund says Sri Lanka's ambitious reform agenda is delivering commendable results, particularly in terms of economic expansion, inflation and foreign reserves. IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak stated that the IMF Executive Board will convene in the coming weeks to deliberate on the staff-level agreement, adding that the third review of Sri Lanka's extended fund facility will take place pursuant to certain stipulations. Kozak added that the disbursement of the fourth tranche of over $300 million to Sri Lanka is contingent not only on the Executive Board's approval of the third review, but also government submitting a budget proposal consistent with IMF parameters. Meanwhile, President Anura Dissanayake met with an IMF delegation to discuss progress of Sri Lanka's extended fund facility.
On November 23rd, IMF staff and the Sri Lankan authorities reached a staff-level agreement on the third review of Sri Lanka's EFF program. Once approved by the IMF's executive board, Sri Lanka will have access to about $333 million in financing, and we expect the board meeting to take place in the coming weeks. Sri Lanka's ambitious reform agenda is delivering commendable outcomes. The economy expanded by 5.5% in the third quarter of 2024. Average headline and core inflation remain contained well below the target during the fourth quarter of 2024. International reserves increased to $6.1 billion at the end of 2024. With respect to the budget, what I can share is that the staff-level agreement, which was reached in November, is subject to executive board approval, but it's also contingent upon, among other things, implementation by the authorities of prior action, including submission of the 2025 budget that is consistent with parameters identified under the program.
Meanwhile, President Anura Dissanayake yesterday participated in a discussion with an International Monetary Fund delegation led by IMF Executive Director Dr. Krishnamurthy Subramanian. The meeting at the Presidential Secretariat focused on the progress of Sri Lanka's extended fund facility and the government's involvement in continuing the program moving forward.
With Budget 2025 scheduled to be tabled in Parliament on the 17th of this month, tax expert N.R. Gajendran believes that the government should introduce methods to increase people's spending power and capacity for investment and savings. To that end, he stated that Sri Lanka can follow the example set by neighbouring India, who in their recently tabled budget increased the tax-free income threshold to encourage savings, which in turn help reduce the budget deficit.
The buzzword for the government is stability. However, certain segments of the society and sectors has to be focused by the government. The budget, if they want to have stability from the people's point of view, vulnerable people has to be certainly focused, and I believe government will look at it because the poverty rates have gone up to 25%. SMEs has to be looked at. They will have to look at haircuts, interest step down, or even long-term deferment of debts. In their mandate, they announced 200,000 tax-free allowances. It has been restricted to 150,000 because of budgetary considerations. The withholding tax on interest is enhanced to 10% is another burning issue. So I believe the government have to go in for self-declaration. There will be some announcement on that. The government will have to find ways and means of incentivizing investment. It has to be an expenditure-based relief because capital expenditure will boost the GDP. There has to be ways and means of encouraging savings. Enhancing the spending power also may be required. We may be able to take a leaf from the Indian budget. Tax-free allowance has been increased about 350 to 400,000 a month. This is expected to boost the spending power and also the saving power of the individuals. The Indian Finance Minister Sita Raman pronounced that the budget deficit will be brought down from 4.7 to 4.4%, and one of the ways of funding it from small-time servers. And India is also focusing on SMEs. 200 million Indian rupees will be given in the form of collateral-free debt. Also, India is going to spend about 100 billion Indian rupees into the fund for startup. So these are all challenges for the government, and they have to make sure the debt sustainability, which will be challenged heavily from 2028, is maintained. They have to get this balance if they are going to encourage savings, investment, and enhancing income.
පිරිපුන් ජීවිතයකට ඔබ සමගින් පෙරට Union Assurance.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, South Asia's biggest entertainment hub, where awe awaits.
චන්දුරුසුමේ කාගෙන් මන අපේ සිග TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්. Sadaharita Plantations Limited, celebrating 22 years of your trust.
Responsibility to look after our health.
The best nutritional supplement for diabetic patients with no added sugar. Maliban Vitagen. Stay healthy for a good reason.
Now, meanwhile, President Anura Dissanayake emphasized that Sri Lanka must continue with the International Monetary Fund program if the island nation is to build a stable economy. The President made these remarks during the 26th Presidential Export Award ceremony organized by the Sri Lanka Export Development Board held at the BMICH today.
As he reflects our progress in 2024, Sri Lanka export industry is staying strong, demonstrating remarkable resilience and potential. Our apparel sector leads the way, contributing impressive 40% to merchandising export. The tea, rubber, coconut industries followed, contributing 11%, 8%, 7% respectively. The emerging high potential export sectors include gem and jewellery, food and beverage, electrical and electronics, pharmaceutical, ornamental fish and boat building. Additionally, export in the service sector including ICT sector, transport and logistics, construction industry provide a significant boost to the national export earning. Equally vital to this ecosystem are our small medium enterprises, SMEs, whose agility and innovation adding the significant value to our export offering. At the Export Development Board, we remain persistent in our commitment to support SMEs' growth, enhancing competitiveness and fostering product diversification to ensure a thriving export landscape. We need to exploit the opportunities by offering high value-added, innovative and high-tech product and services.
මේ ඉලක්ක කෙනෙකුට හිතෙන්න පුළුවන් අසීරු ඉලක්ක කියලා ලබන අවුරුද්ද වෙනකොට
One might think these targets are unachievable. Within next year, we will rake in $18 billion. By 2030, we expect the export sector to bring in $36 billion. Additionally, with the tourist sector, we are planning to achieve an export target of $45 billion. These targets may be seen as difficult ones. We see them to be difficult because under previous regimes, policies were not made with export development, industry protection or entrepreneurship development in mind. Policies back then were contrary to those interests. The Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, together with the Export Development Board and other institutions, plan to create a culture of industry and entrepreneurship. As we continue to protect important industries such as tea, apparel and gem and jewellery, while continuing their development, we believe that there may be other untouched industries that can bring development to the export sector. We are working towards modernity through other industries. Therefore, as a country, we have a significant chance to go forward.
නවීනත්වයට ගමන් කරමින් ඉන්නවා. ඒ නිසා රටක් හැටියට අපිට ගොඩක් ඉස්සරහට යන්න අවස්ථාව තියෙනවා.
අපි මීට අවුරුදු දෙකකට විතර පමණ පෙර බංකොලොත් භාවයට පත් වූ රටක්.
2 years ago, our country went bankrupt. Because of that, we lost the ability to stand on our own. We had to get support, and it was from the International Monetary Fund. Now we face two choices: whether we should continue our agreements with the International Monetary Fund, or whether we should let go of them and choose a different path. However, all statistics suggest that we must remain in the IMF program. At the moment, the global market and economy does not operate independently. Therefore, when it comes to foreign stakeholders, it is crucial to protect their trust in the stability of our economy. Specifically, there are certain targets that we must achieve. One is that the revenue of 2025 must remain at 15.1% of GDP. There must be a 2.3 billion surplus in the primary account. That means the expenditure limit must remain at 13.8% of GDP. We must remain within the borrowing limit. That foundation is strongly required if we are to achieve stability.
අපිට ඒ අත්තිවාරම අවශ්‍යයි අපි නැවත නැගිටිනවා.
Now ahead of the crucial budget 2025, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya vows that reforms will be launched in 2026 to develop the quality of education in Sri Lanka. Speaking at an event, the Prime Minister went on to say that developing education stands as a top priority for the government, since no country can develop sound education. A program was held at the Ministry of Education yesterday, where several children from low-income families received gift vouchers worth 6,000 rupees based on an initiative to provide school exercise books and supplies. The program was held under the patronage of Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya.
Establishing access to education and improving it is a top priority of our government. We all are bound to execute that responsibility. Establishing access to education doesn't simply mean building schools. Building an atmosphere where students attend school with self-respect and with an enthusiasm to proudly pursue education is imperative. We attach so much weight to this endeavor because no country can develop without education. All of us serving at the Ministry of Education have a massive challenge ahead of us. From 2026 onwards, we intend to present several new reforms to increase the quality of education in the country. If any of you are skeptical about being able to implement those reforms, you can get rid of such doubts today. We can do it.
Fast track your career from O levels with eSoft.
Diabetol සීනි වලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
Prime Group ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වතාවට හඳුන්වා දෙන land leasing ලේසියෙන් මීටමක්.
Single 1111 up to 60% off from the 11th November to the 17th of November.
කැලණි වයර් කිසි ගින්නක් නැහැ.
කිසි ගින්නක් නැහැ. කැලණි Fire Shield Wire.
Meanwhile, in Parliament today, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya vowed that the government will continue to pursue justice for late veteran journalist Lasantha Wickrematunge, adding that new investigations will be initiated if required. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath revealed that over 500 Sri Lankans had been enlisted into military service in Russia and that nearly 60 of them had lost their lives. And on other Parliament news, New Democratic Front MP Ravi Karunanayake submitted a proposal to abolish the pensions of former parliamentarians.
Mr. Lasantha Wickrematunge's daughter has written to you quite a damning letter. It calls for the impeachment of the Attorney General. I wish to find out whether the Honourable Prime Minister has something in mind with regards to this matter.
We intend to seek justice for the murder of Lasantha Wickrematunge. We are doing our very best to follow due process to give the Attorney General's office that independence, but that is also the responsibility of our government to ensure that justice is served. If necessary, we will initiate new inquiries inquiries, take every step possible to gather new evidence, and if necessary, we will file new cases. We will do everything that we can to make sure that this case receives justice.
According to information received as of the 20th of January 2025, 554 Sri Lankans had been enlisted into military service in Russia. However, there are no reports that any of them were forced into doing so. According to reports obtained from the Sri Lankan embassy in Russia, 59 Sri Lankans had died in Russian military service as at the 20th of January 2025. Efforts are underway to repatriate the remaining Sri Lankans back to Sri Lanka. I would like to issue a clarification regarding reports on the release of drinking water with a high concentration of carcinogens by the National Water Supply and Drainage Board. This report has caused panic among consumers. Hydrated lime is used when purifying water. The National Water Supply Board called tenders to procure 1,500 metric tons of hydrated lime. The supplier provided an initial batch of 380 metric tons of hydrated lime. Upon lab inspections, it was revealed that the chromium content within this particular batch was above the accepted standard of 10 milligrams. According to the lab report, the batch had 11.3 milligrams of chromium per kilo of hydrated lime. When the tender was called, the Sri Lanka Standards Institution specified a limit of 10 milligrams of chromium per kilo. However, by the 26th of December 2024, SLS revised that limit to 12 milligrams per kilo of hydrated lime. The request for this revision was not made recently. This request was made on the 20th of January 2024. Therefore, the revision does not relate to this stock of hydrated lime in question. However, as I mentioned earlier, this stock was never taken into stores or into purification facilities. This stock was never used.
52 days ago, a batch of hydrated lime was imported into the country. Only 10 milligrams of chromium is permissible per kilo in Sri Lanka. However, this stock imported had 14 milligrams per kilo. Ever since I made this revelation today, I have received more than 100 calls from the water board. I received a call from Gaul. This particular caller claims that the imported stock in question and the stock of hydrated lime used at the moment are both housed within the same building on opposite sides. Why did the water board appeal to the SLS requesting a revision of the permissible standard of chromium to 12 milligrams?
Today I stand in this parliament to propose and to discuss a matter that has been source of great discontent and frustration among the people. The pensions awarded to our members of parliament.
Currently, only 215 former parliamentarians receive pensions. However, it was portrayed as if every pension in the country was being paid to parliamentarians. Shouldn't that misconception be corrected?
Currently, 23,541,645 rupees and 96 cents are being spent monthly for former parliamentarians' pensions. Therefore, we will raise not one but both hands in favour of the proposal to abolish parliamentarians' privileges and pensions. MP Gamini Ratnayaka too will receive a pension. Read the Chitrasiri report. It recommends granting pensions after 10 years. Therefore, this proposal will not affect pensions granted previously. MP Vijitha Herath submitted this same proposal in 2001. That is why we say that this proposal is commendable. As the government, we concur with it.
A former parliamentarian Premanath C. Dolawatha asserted that the compensation he received for property damages caused during the people's struggle in 2022 is not sufficient, adding that he is dissatisfied with the compensation calculations. Dolawatha made this statement after Chief Government Whip Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa revealed in Parliament yesterday a list of 43 former parliamentarians who have allegedly received compensation for property damage incurred during the people's struggle in 2022, adding that a total of 1.2 billion rupees were provided as compensation.
The government must probe the arsonists. They are issuing such reports without looking into the arsonists. They are still playing the role of the opposition. If they probe into the arsonists, they might have to incarcerate their party affiliates. Did the arsonists do the right thing? They enjoy it when others are victimized. Don't do that. A country will not develop like that. I claimed 800,000 rupees as compensation to reconstruct my house and a further 1.4 million rupees to furnish it. It is public knowledge. I requested information under the Right to Information Act on how the compensation amounts were calculated since I thought the compensation was not adequate. I received a letter. However, I did not receive the relevant calculations. Thereafter, I decided to claim the compensation provided rather than looking into it further. They destroyed around 40 windows, doors, light fittings and fans at my residence. This is an ancient house that is nearly 100 years old. I did not receive the compensation entitled to a house that is considered ancient. I merely received 837,000 rupees to repair the 40 broken windows. The constructions are not complete. However, I will do it according to my ability. Can they destroy residences just because we hold an opinion different to theirs? Was this caused by natural means? He mentioned in Parliament that maximum compensation provided to residences destroyed due to natural causes is 2.5 million rupees. They must be considering such acts as natural causes. Rather than focusing on the fact that those who did not commit arson must provide compensation, we should focus on the fact that this situation was created after a group of unruly individuals attacked the peaceful protests. Thereafter, they made sure they are overcompensated. The compensation calculations were definitely conducted by those who calculated funds allocated for Mahinda Rajapaksa's residence. It is observed that those who committed arson are considered to be innocent, while those who sustained losses from arson are considered the culprits. Who triggered this situation? Who triggered the crowd for them to surround the parliament? A video of KD Lalkanta is circulating on social media. In this particular video, he clearly mentions what happened. I looked into gathering people that day. I called Ranjan Jayalal from the Ceylon Electricity Board and instructed him to bring a group of people. I called representatives of the Postal Union and also to other districts. I told them injustice is being committed and instructed them to immediately launch protests. We spread this message in all districts based on our organizational system. Those who led the struggle are now on the front line in Parliament. There are multiple assumptions that the current government influenced this.
Welcome back. Now, the newly appointed commanders of the Tri-Forces called on the Commander-in-Chief, President Anura Dissanayake, today. The commander of the Sri Lanka Army, Lieutenant General Lasantha Rodrigo, the new commander of the Sri Lanka Navy, Vice Admiral Kanchana Banagoda, and the new commander of the Air Force, Air Marshal Vasubandhu Edirisinghe, met the president this afternoon at the Presidential Secretariat. At the end of the meeting, the new commanders presented commemorative souvenirs to the president. In your business news, in a bid to strengthen bilateral trade between Sri Lanka and Sweden, Honorary Consul of Sri Lanka in Gothenburg, Sweden, Marcus Peterson, visited the Sri Lankan Export Development Board recently. During the meeting, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Export Development Board, Mangala Vijayasinghe, outlined Sri Lanka's trade and export policy, emphasizing the country's strategic plan to boost exports through product diversification and market expansion in the next 5 years. EDB CEO Vijayasinghe highlighted Sri Lanka's potential to further penetrate the Swedish market, particularly in key sectors such as apparel and textiles, rubber, tea, fruits, spices and ICT BPM services. He requested the collaboration of the Honorary Consul to implement strategies to enhance Sri Lanka's market share in the identified product and service sectors in Sweden. Honorary Consul Peterson acknowledged Sri Lanka's export potential in Sweden, particularly in the ICT sector, spices, processed foods and organic products. Further, he also assured Sweden's commitment towards working with the EDB to enhance Sri Lanka's market share in Sweden and wider Nordic region. In other business-related updates, the European Union, through the United Nations Industrial Development Organization's BESPA Food Project, is set to support Sri Lanka's coconut industry in implementing a comprehensive 10-year strategic plan and a roadmap aimed at transforming the sector into a $2 billion export industry. The Minister of Plantation and Community Infrastructure recently convened key public and private sector stakeholders, including the Coconut Development Authority, Coconut Research Institute, the Coconut Cultivation Board and the Ceylon Chamber of Coconut Industries for an inception workshop to chart the way forward. To ensure rapid progress, a select committee comprising key public and private sector representatives, chaired by Secretary of the Ministry, is expected to meet in mid-February to review workshops' input and formulate the next steps, including the development of the roadmap. The Institute of Policy Studies, tasked with formulating the roadmap, will incorporate input from industry stakeholders to address current market pressures while building long-term resilience. The plan will specifically focus on strengthening domestic production, improving supply chain efficiency and value addition, and enhancing the industry's ability to meet growing international demand. Now in other business news, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in greed today, aided by price gains in counters such as Selinco Holdings, Melsta Corp and John Keel's Holdings. The SPI settled 1.38% higher, ending at 16,734.68 points. Meanwhile, the S&P Sri Lanka 20 climbed 1.4% to settle at 4,992.14 points. Market turnover crossed 2 billion rupees. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to market turnover, followed by the food, beverage and tobacco sector, which was the second highest contributor. During the week, the SPI and the S&P Sri Lanka 20 lost 2.3% and 2.4% respectively, while recording an average daily turnover of 4.16 billion rupees. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net sellers, offloading shares worth 141 million rupees. Now here's a look at the rupee exchange rates during the day. That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.